It began, as many geopolitical earthquakes do, with a single leak. Not a speech, not a press conference, just one line buried deep inside a classified diplomatic cable. But that line was enough to rattle an entire continent. Burkina Faso had been given 48 hours. The demand was blunt. Hand over 70% of the nation's gold reserves or immediately repay its entire sovereign debt, including interest. The total came to $5.6 billion. At the bottom of the message was a name that carried global weight. Donald Trump. At the time, he was president of the United States, the most powerful voice inside the G7, a dominant force within the International Monetary Fund. This was not routine diplomacy. It was economic coercion, delivered without negotiation, without compromise, and without warning. The ultimatum stunned not only officials in Ouagadougou, but also several governments inside the G7 itself. Neutral IMF member states were caught off guard. There were no talks scheduled, no concessions offered, only a deadline: pay the debt or surrender the gold. For Burkina Faso, the message landed like a missile aimed directly at its sovereignty. Before dawn on August 12, 2025, at exactly 6:30 a.m., the classified cable was placed on the desk of Captain Ibrahim Traoré. The delivery was deliberate, hand-carried through a trusted intermediary, observed, according to sources, by representatives linked to both the G7 and the IMF, including senior international figures who understood precisely what this document meant. The wording left no room for interpretation. Either U.S., British, French, Canadian, and German corporations, backed by the IMF, would immediately gain control of 70% of Burkina Faso's gold mining and exports, or the country would face sanctions, resource blockades, and what the document described as internal destabilization mechanisms. This was not diplomacy. It was extortion. The tone was cold, transactional, almost contemptuous. We saved you from terrorism. We fed you when you were starving. We lent you money. Now you will pay. What the authors of the message failed to understand was who they were dealing with. Traoré did not panic. He did not stall. He did not ask for time. He summoned senior military commanders, trusted ministers, and key figures from the national mining sector. When the room was sealed, his message was short and unmistakable. Burkina Faso is not for sale. Within hours, the story leaked beyond diplomatic circles. African media outlets moved fast. From Lagos to Kinshasa, headlines carried the same theme. The West demands Africa's gold. Burkina Faso given 48 hours. But Traoré did not respond with statements or letters. He responded with strategy. For months, something extraordinary had been unfolding beneath the scorched earth of northern Burkina Faso. Not rumor, not speculation, a confirmed geological reality. A massive, untapped mineral deposit identified by a covert task force established shortly after Traoré took power. The data was encrypted, the operation compartmentalized. Even senior officials were kept in the dark until drilling began. Foreign intelligence noticed almost immediately. Surveillance satellites detected unusual activity. Energy signatures appeared where none had existed before. Equipment shipments traced back to Iran and Venezuela raised red flags. Then came the confirmation: gold. At the same time, Burkina Faso quietly reclaimed control of its existing mines. Western contractors were expelled. French and American firms lost access overnight. Control shifted to national military units. Revenue that once flowed to Paris and offshore accounts was redirected into a domestic development fund. To the G7 and the IMF, the message was unmistakable. This was a gold-rich nation no longer answering to Wall Street, no longer governed through Paris, no longer compliant. It was not just defiance. It was a model, and that model was dangerous. Phone calls began circulating through Western capitals. The question was the same everywhere. How do we stop this before it spreads? The answer was pressure, blunt force, fear. The ultimatum was formalized inside a document labeled Debt Recovery Strategy Framework. Behind the bureaucratic language was a simple demand: 70% of Burkina Faso's gold would be handed to foreign corporations under IMF supervision. Export routes will be controlled by U.S.-approved intermediaries. An external advisory board would oversee revenue distribution. In exchange, there would be security guarantees, protection from regime change. The threat was barely disguised. At the top of the document, written in red ink, were 4 words. 48 hours to decide. Traoré understood immediately. This was not about debt. It was about control. He refused to play the role assigned to him. Instead of calling Washington, he called the commander of the Special Sovereignty Force, a covert unit created for moments exactly like this. Orders went out. Gold convoy secured. Data links severed. Foreign access locked down. By noon, the nation was watching. The broadcast was simple. No studio. No theatrics. Traoré stood in uniform, one hand on the flag, the other holding the ultimatum. His voice was calm. They are not demanding money. They are demanding fear. Then he looked directly into the camera. To those behind this insult, including President Trump, you have misjudged us. We are not Libya. We are not Iraq. We are not your playground. You gave us 2 days. Here is our answer. Take your greed and leave African soil. Then he walked away. The reaction was immediate. Across Africa, celebrations erupted. But inside Western boardrooms and intelligence agencies, panic set in. If Burkina Faso could say no, what would stop others? Surveillance intensifiée. Smear campaigns followed. Headlines warned of disaster. Analysts labeled Traoré reckless, unstable, dangerous. Inside Burkina Faso, something very different was happening. Volunteers guarded mines. Students organized forums on sovereignty. Communities fed soldiers. Each attack from Western media only strengthened public resolve. Traoré understood the truth. The enemy was not one president. It was a system. Banks, corporations, institutions that had extracted African wealth for generations. Then something unexpected happened. 3 military aircraft landed in Ouagadougou. From Mali, from Niger, from Guinea. Their leaders emerged together and stood beside Traoré. If you touch Burkina Faso, you touch all of us. It was not symbolism. It was doctrine. The AES alliance mobilized. Advisors deployed. Airspace opened. Supply lines secured. A unified media response dismantled disinformation in real time. This was no longer one country standing alone. It was a firewall. Then China moved. Quietly. Engineers arrived. A proposal followed. A mining system built in 90 days. A valuation process outside Western banks. Trade conducted without the dollar. Russia followed with security. Advanced defenses. No speeches. No lectures. In Washington, outrage grew. Media coverage turned hysterical. Traoré was labeled a puppet, a dictator, the next Gaddafi. Online, Africa responded differently. They called him a leader. When the 48-hour deadline expired, Traoré made his boldest move. Behind closed doors, Burkina Faso's assembly passed a historic resolution. All gold reserves were permanently nationalized. Foreign corporate ownership was banned. Licenses were revoked. Contractors escorted out. Diplomats informed plainly. Our resources are not collateral. That evening, Traoré addressed the nation in traditional attire. I'm not here to serve empires. I am here to serve my people. Then the line that echoed across the continent. I will not negotiate with thieves. Celebrations erupted. The ultimatum failed. 2 days later, silence from the G7, from the IMF. Then a message appeared online from Trump, written in all caps. Traoré just made the biggest mistake of his life. Markets trembled. Warships repositioned. Traoré read the message, smiled, and said quietly, "That is the sound of an empire losing control." Protests followed across Africa, outside embassies, across capitals, and then a final message. A 43-second video from Traoré himself. This is not just about gold. This is about the soul of Africa. And I would rather die standing than live kneeling. The video went viral. For Africa, it was not a threat. It was a beginning. For the first time in generations, a nation had said no, and meant it.